Someone who is standing on the balustrade of a terrace on the 70th floor with arms wide open certainly might give the impression of at least being tired. From where he stood, Norman had an excellent view of the entire building. The project's name was the Silver Mountain, an office tower designed to resemble a mountain peak. Of course, it wasn't as irregular as a real mountain. The seemingly random breaks and slopes hid windows and balconies, offices with panoramic views of the city, so instead of the rounded lines of rocks, flat panes of glass had to define them. However, from a few dozen meters away, and even from the balustrade at the top, the illusion remained absolute. A mountain hewn from blue crystal. There were also terraces covered with twisted Japanese-style cedars, carefully sculpted marble rocks, and even a waterfall. It flowed from the wall at the 56th floor, cascading in a shimmering stream into an irregular pool on the 20th. The water circled in a closed loop. It flowed in a glassy curtain behind the windows of the managers, directors, and brokers' offices, and after crashing onto the rocky bottom of the pool, it was pushed back up to the 56th floor by pumps. And so on, endlessly. Along the way, it powered turbines that, to some extent, supplied the pumps with electricity. Very eco-friendly. The world is despicable, Norman thought, then spread his arms and fell flat forward, like a crucifix knocked off a windowsill. He hit the air as if it were an elastic wall. At this speed, the air, thickened to the consistency of jelly, pressed into his lungs, thundered and whistled in his ears. The pool, bordered by rocks and overgrown with pines, flew past him and disappeared somewhere above. Norman spun around a few times and was just at the 15th floor when suddenly, in the blue sky, a door opened, letting in a rectangle of white light. Through it stepped the Pink Panther, holding a round bomb in her hand, and she spoke with the voice of his boss. "Norman, drop by my office," said the Panther. The fuse burned down, and the bomb exploded with pink zigzags, and Norman landed in his chair. He removed the virtualizer, helping himself with his teeth, unfastened the Velcro straps of the control gloves, and massaged his face. The interior of the hangar was lined with graphic terminals and computer stations. Everywhere he looked, the Silver Mountain was present, in the form of drafts, drawings, visualizations, printouts, and plans. In cross-sections and in detail. On the circular platform of the holoscope in the center of the hall, its completed image slowly rotated, shimmering like a giant block of mountain crystal. Piles of flat pizza boxes, containers of spicy wings or shrimp, sandwich wrappers, pyramids of single-use espresso cups, and collections of paper coffee cups littered the area. The air hung heavy with the stench of sweat, smoke, and coffee. The smell of hard, finished work. Most of the employees were moving sluggishly, like flies in syrup, slowly gathering their things. Mariola and Wojciech were asleep on a mattress shoved behind the copiers. Miloš was dozing at a graphic terminal, his arms wrapped around his head. He still had control gloves on his hands. Through the window, Norman could see the grass-covered tarmac of the old airport, and by the hangar entrance, Irina lounging on a deck chair, her long legs stretched out on a folding table, surrounded by empty cans of Jomsborg. Within her reach was an open cooler, but the boss's deputy seemed to be dozing in the morning sun, with a half-emptied can dangling from her limp hand. Norman got up from his workstation, grimacing at the unbelievable heap of trash and debris around him, looking as if a storm had tossed it there. The boss's office was on a mezzanine under the hangar roof. It was less messy than the workshop because the boss hadn't been there for almost 2 weeks, sitting downstairs by the graphic terminal instead. Now he was sprawled in a chair, clearly fighting off sleep, smoking a massive Corona cigar. When he saw Norman, he gave him that practiced, motivational smile that meant absolutely nothing. "Why aren't you coming with us to the Maldives?" he asked, without preamble. "Aren't you happy we sold the mountain? And why should I be happy in the Maldives in particular? I have to go to Stibark. I've been telling you this for half a year. But right when we've won, everyone regrets that you're not going. And I'm upset. This isn't some lame corporation or an integration weekend. We sold this project, the company's alive, and we have the Castle Gate housing development as a backup. We're settled for at least a year and a half. I wanted this trip to be a gift for everyone. Roman, understand, I got my hands on a pass. They don't just hand those out. It's valid for these days only. If I don't go tomorrow, the window's gone and I need to go through all of the fuss from scratch. What's dragging you there? Close the door. Norman, this isn't normal. There are girls in the Maldives too, if that's what this is about, but in my opinion, you don't need to be doing. Norman leaned his hands on the desk and leaned toward his boss. Roman, my dear boss, my director. So you think I'm some sort of sex tourist, huh? Boss, I was born in SpecTerr. I lived there until I was 20. My mother's there, my brother, my sister raising my nephew. In Stillbark. Jesus. I'm sorry, how was I supposed to know? Why don't you pull them out of there? You could set them up. They don't want to. Can you believe it? They're scared. So what can I do? I'm sorry, the boss said. I feel stupid. But I thought you were losing it. He pointed an accusing finger at Norman. We worked ourselves to the bone. All of us. You should rest. That's all. I understand you have to go, but you should also recharge. You jumped off the roof. Cheap psychology. I wanted to look at the waterfall. Sure. And you, boss, got into my computer. That's called aping, boss. Can I go? Of course you can. Did you check those structural nodes? I simulated a hurricane. They hold like crazy. You get that I have to go. Get out of here. Have a nice weekend, Norman. He stepped out in front of the flat hangar and dragged himself to the parking lot. Their cars hadn't left their spots by the fence for 2 weeks. Norman fumbled for his key fob in his pocket. His bright yellow Tatra Pulsar beeped twice and began folding down the roof, which Norman had raised back in mid-April when the terrible Silver Mountain Marathon began. If you've been living in the workspace for 15 days, how can you know if it's going to rain? A beautiful spring day was waking up. Across the airport, by the Aero Club hangars, someone suffering from insomnia was tormenting the engine of a replica of a Fokker triplane. A lark chirped hysterically high above. Norman threw his jacket onto the passenger seat and solemnly promised himself that for the next few weeks, at this time of day, he would be coming home from parties, not work. The Pulsar flashed a light from the reader into his eye and activated its systems. Good morning, Norman, said the car. Norman, fighting his drooping eyelids, placed his hands on the small sports steering wheel, then sighed and gave in. He loved driving, but he felt that soon, from lack of sleep, he would start hallucinating. Auto mode. Take me home. Standard route. Hybrid drive, start with the electric engine, switch to hydrogen drive on the highway, style, aggressive. Speed max permitted. The engine emitted an annoying, rising jet turbine whine and then faded to a barely audible hum. Norman thought that a car with such a look should roar thunderously, and not buzz like a hairdryer. Resting his neck on the headrest, he watched the steering wheel spin. Auto mode active. Route accepted, the Pulsar muttered. Warning, suggested route correction. Traffic collision reported on Graz Bridge. Red congestion, peaking to black. Suggested correction, Boers Bridge, Modlin route, turn onto the road to Nieporet, then along the canal. Traffic density, green to yellow. Estimated travel time, 27 minutes. Correction approved. Player on, collection, classical music. Tracks, London Calling, Man in the Long Black Coat, Red Right Hand, Road to Hell. He hoped that classical music would wake him up a little. A weekend in the SpecTerr. He didn't even know if he was happy about it or afraid. He thought that, deep down, he might actually prefer to go to the Maldives. All the way home, his eyelids kept drooping, but he didn't fall asleep. The apartment, abandoned 2 weeks ago, seemed almost alien to him. A strange stuffiness hung in the air. On the dining table, he found remnants of a Hawaiian salad from some mid-April breakfast. He tossed his jacket toward the coat rack, but of course missed. I've come back home, I'll tell no one. All work and no play will make me a dull boy, he sang. Password accepted. Defense mode deactivated. Good morning, Norman, said the apartment. Do you want to listen to your messages? Sort them, he replied, heading to the kitchen and beginning to clean up. Category spam. Skip delete. Accepted. Category personal. Sender Zazula. Message. In mid-stride to the kitchen, the vision of a skinny, tall girl with hair spiked around her head like the quills of a fugu fish materialized. Hi. Remember me? We met at Late's party. Remember the bathroom? Oh God, I remember. Norman groaned. I just wanted to say it was awesome. If you... Delete block sender. Accepted. Category business. Sender, Detective Rybczynski. Message. The detective materialized, sitting on a kneeling ergonomic chair, dressed in a shaggy tracksuit. He claimed he had once been beaten up, and since then, had back problems. I'm calling regarding your inquiry. Based on the information gathered so far, no, I repeat, no Gregor Karwanowski has crossed the border of Special Economic Territory Pomerania 17. And I mean it. Neither legally nor illegally. No one matching the genetic identification parameters you provided has appeared at any immigration point, under any identity. So far, no such person has been found among workers employed illegally either. As far as I know, our people are not at all concerned with how someone crosses the border, so your brother-in-law would have to be crazy not to register. He would have received some money, soup, a roof over his head, some courses, maybe even a job. For the past 2 years, every kibbutz has been welcoming newcomers with open arms. There's a minimal chance he either couldn't or was too scared to, but then he should have shown up somewhere. I doubt he went straight to Europe, because according to your words, he had no means to do so. My bet is he's still in one of the SpecTerrs. Theoretically, he could have left 17 and ended up in another one. Or something might have happened to him there. That's all I know. In any case, he probably didn't cross the border. Since you're going there, you could report him missing to the local police, although I wouldn't recommend it. If nothing's happened to him, you'll only cause him trouble. You can hire me to investigate on the other side, but it'll be costly. The kibbutzniks won't allow someone like me to snoop around. When you get back, we can talk. I'll send the report via email. Goodbye. Save for analysis. Catalog personal, subcatalog, brother-in-law. Encrypt. Default password. Accepted. He cleaned up the kitchen, took a shower, and then collapsed onto the bed. 8 hours of sleep. Mode Fortress. Don't connect anyone without emergency password. Gradual wake up 4:30 p.m. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Norman, rise! Norman, rise! Morning bells are ringing. The sound was like a crazed choir of millions of sparrows and nightingales, but the words were perfectly clear. For God's sake, deactivate! He yelled. I mean, extrapolation, magnificence, Nebuchadnezzar is quite a wench. I'm awake. Lights, level 0. Temperature, default. Good morning, Norman. Alarm deactivated. The time is 4:30 p.m. You have 7 hours until departure. Norman massaged his numb, sweat-slicked face. The bedroom felt like a sauna, and the lamps were blazing like stadium floodlights. Someone had once come up with the idea that the natural and healthy way to wake up was to gradually find yourself in full sunlight and heat, surrounded by chirping birds. The sun is already up, it's getting warm and bright, the birds are singing. Good day, Norman, said the fridge. Good day, Norman, said the shower. Good day, Curva, said Norman. He packed, carefully selecting his clothes. First rule of SpecTerr, don't attract attention. He couldn't normally, and certainly not in his elegant black jacket embroidered with bamboo stems. That would cause a commotion. Someone would either try to buy it from him, beg for it as a gift, or rob him. And above all, they would keep staring at him. Also, the weather could turn. Early May could be scorching hot, but sudden gusts of Arctic cold are also not out of question. He prepared the least noticeable clothes possible. Most of them he usually wore to his garden plot. A black sweater, plain khaki jeans, and hiking boots. The problem started with the gifts. Bringing anything into a SpecTerr was like playing the lottery, a high-stakes game, and a showdown between man and a soulless machine. On top of that, it was a battle of wits and greed between man and the officials. Norman had his methods, but none of them were foolproof. He prepared an arsenal of a few tricks and counted on a bit of luck. Some things he would have to buy on the way anyway. He felt like a spy heading out on a mission to a hostile country, not like someone going to visit family. He wasn't a novice. Cash. Kibbutzim converted euros into eco-vouchers at an imaginary, absurd rate of 1-to-1, and any fool who tried to use a chip would be instantly robbed. Anyway, everyone handled everything in cash. So he had prepared a stash of money in small bills. He took off his titanium Tag Heuer watch and put on a disposable wristwatch he got as an ad from some construction company. Even that would make too much of an impression if someone noticed it. The watch had a radio, an alarm, and a compass. He packed 2 more in his bag. A gift like that, given at the right moment, could save someone's life in SpecTerr. The bus moved through the night. Norman stared at the strange, aquarium green landscape displayed by the night vision cameras. He felt a bit scared and a bit sad. He told himself it was just the result of overwork, but it didn't help. He felt exhausted, but he also had the sense that his life was cheap and plastic. He designed more buildings, sat at home staring at the wall screen, living a more interesting, better, and fictional life through movie characters, or stood on the balcony with a glass in hand, gazing at the sails on the reservoir. He also had empty, stupid conversations with the phantoms of people, sometimes sitting hundreds of kilometers away from him, all of it somehow fake and flat. Life in SpecTerr might have been hard, but it was more real. He thought that back when he lived there, he knew how to enjoy life more. Buying a t-shirt or a piece of smoked meat was enough to make you as happy as a child. What would he have to do now to feel the same kind of happiness as when Mariana managed to trick the harpies, and they could meet around the campfire by the lake? He remembered those all-night conversations over a bottle of terrible vodka and a single pickle. Back then, a friend was a friend, an enemy was an enemy, and life had a real taste and smell. He turned off the window, and the world sank into pitch-black darkness. For a while, he read the Herald, but the articles that had interested him before hadn't updated. He shut off the paper and folded the sheet into quarters so it would fit in the seat pocket. There, he also found a set of leaflets from the coach operator company. "Let's see what's new at home," he muttered. Special economic territories were established over 30 years ago as a social experiment. Read the first leaflet. They were intended to resolve the ongoing and increasingly intense conflict between the citizens of European countries, who represented 2 completely opposing and irreconcilable philosophies and lifestyles, differing understandings of the role of the state, the citizen, and the law, until it was agreed that both of these concepts would be implemented simultaneously in different areas chosen by plebiscites. The conflict resulted in escalating social tensions, culminating in the series of bloody events of 2020. Today, more than 3 decades later, it's clear that the existence of both zones is no longer an experiment, but that we must speak of 2 different Europes. Distinct yet living side by side within one governmental structure. Thanks to this, citizens of each zone can pursue visions of the state that align most closely with their worldviews. And what's more, they always have the choice of which state they want to live in. Today, the choice between individual freedom and security, between individualism and collectivism, between economic freedom and state care, and between the right to risk and the right to safety, between fulfilling personal ambitions and building the common good, is no longer a dilemma for Europeans, but a continuously open option. "Blah blah blah," said Norman. He flipped through the leaflets, as he was interested in something else. What could be brought into the zone now? What could be said publicly? And what words, concepts, and behaviors had recently been banned? But such details weren't included in the leaflets. There were only the most basic warnings. Remember, in the special economic territory, smoking tobacco is not allowed in any public places. Violating this ban is a crime. Remember, always carry your identification card and show it on demand to the authorities. No other documents are accepted. Failure to present documents is a crime. Remember, drinking alcohol in public places in the special economic territory is a crime. Remember, telling jokes about the territory's social policies, gender issues, healthy lifestyles, non-Christian religions, cultures other than the patriarchal Western culture, portraying minorities in an inappropriate light, or in any way relating to women is a crime. Remember, a male person accused of sexual harassment must provide proof of his innocence. Remember, any physical contact with a sexual undertone with a woman, who at any point does not give or maintain full consent in any form, is considered crime. Remember, it is always the woman's prerogative to assess whether the contact has a sexual undertone. Remember, engaging in any form of prostitution is a crime. Remember, the use of expressions that could be deemed oppressive is a crime. Remember, whether your behavior is considered sexual harassment is entirely up to the subjective judgment of the person being harassed. Harassment can consist of speaking, ostentatious silence, looking, any form of touch, avoiding eye contact, as well as provocative clothing or facial expressions. Sexual harassment is a crime. The pamphlet spanned 4 pages, but it was just material for newcomers, and clearly written by an idiot. The truth was, you could do anything, as long as you knew how. It was like with cigarettes. You had to smoke poorly rolled joints or tobacco in small pipes, pretending it was cannabis. Tobacco was banned, but they turned a blind eye to weed. The rules should have been put out simpler. Never talk to strangers. Never be alone with an unfamiliar woman or a child. Don't raise your eyes. Don't speak. Be invisible. Whatever you do, it's better if no one sees it and no one knows about it. Never trust anyone completely. And most importantly, if they want to screw you over, they will. If they don't see you, maybe they won't want to. 2 kilometers before the border of Territory 17, the bus pulled into a parking lot next to a 24/7 supermarket. A careful observer could learn a lot about the situation in SpecTerr by reading the signs for sales. In these stores, goods that were in highest demand in the zone were discounted. Some people made business out of it, but the only payment they could expect to receive there had to be taken in kind. Canned food is a blast regardless of the season. Military and camping rations, freeze-dried or sealed in tins. Simply because you could stash them in a cupboard and keep them for a long time. In stores in SpecTerr, one could get almost all the basic products without ration stamps. Bread, grains, pasta, vinegar, and various types of soy products. Most things came in just one variety. Dairy products were rationed because they contained cholesterol. The same went for meat. If there was any, it was usually minced. Now it turned out that, for unclear reasons, the kibbutzim were having trouble with salt and sugar. Spices always sold well. Soy sauces, herb blends, Tabasco, different marinades, and hot sauces. The reason was simple. They could turn bland, monotonous, and diet food into something edible. For some inexplicable reason, the authorities frowned upon this, and the zone's magazines were full of alarmist articles about the supposed dangers of all spices. Better quality alcohol remained a prime commodity. Cheap whiskey, metaxa, rum, and cognac had long served as a substitute currency, just like tobacco. However, you had to keep in mind the 20-kilogram transport limit. That's why Norman usually bought rolling tobacco and cognac. He also didn't forget sweets and fruit for little Kuba. In SpecTerr, fruit was mostly limited to apples and plums, and sweets to a few strange local products. Some of them Norman even liked. For example, powdered milk balls or chalky tablets. He didn't usually enjoy shopping, and especially hated shopping in hypermarkets. But this time, it had a completely different meaning. He felt like Santa Claus getting ready for his mission in the polar circle. If you remembered the constant queues, waiting lists, and vouchers in SpecTerr, a regular supermarket turned into a treasure trove. In SpecTerr, people stocked up on everything they could. You'd think he would have remembered how things were, but still, he almost forgot about coffee. He had no idea why they were short of things like coffee there. Here, just across the border, the stores were literally piled with mountains of coffee beans, ground coffee, and granules. Whole Alps and Himalayas of coffee. Some types were surely affordable for SpecTerr residents, whose earnings amounted to barely €100. Even assuming that everyone would only get the cheapest and worst products, but at least distributed fairly, they should still have a much bigger selection. So why the coffee shortage? They had one type of pencil, one type of notebook, one type of light bulb, one type of pate. And yet something was always missing. Some goods weren't available because they were deemed politically incorrect. Possession wasn't prohibited, but they wouldn't show up in stores. Other things were simply scarce, be it batteries, matches, or shoes. He barely managed to push the loaded cart to the self-checkout. It took him 5 minutes just to unload his items onto the conveyor belt. At the checkout itself, he grabbed a pack of disposable pens, some salted pine nuts, razor blades, and a pack of batteries. He remembered that Kuba had secretly asked him for some blank memory cubes, so he dashed back to the electronics section while the checkout machine started swallowing his purchases. He brought 4 stuffed bags made of chitin biofilm back to the bus and paid less than usual for a week's worth of groceries. He unzipped the extra compartments of his bag, turning it into a bundle the size of a sailor's sack. In SpecTerr, absolutely everything, including cheap pens, would turn into treasures and bring someone joy. They arrived at the border around 4 in the morning and found out they would have to wait. Private cars were not allowed into the territories, and 3 more buses were lined up ahead. The idea was to educate citizens to embrace eco-friendly public transport, and the authorities decided to leave the resolution to the phenomenon of technical death. Until people learned to love buses, there would be no new cars, except, of course, for those granted due to necessity or merit. The rest of the territory's residents spent half their lives resurrecting terrible mechanical zombies, sometimes dating back to before the establishment of the distributive economy territories. One by one, they faced failure and, having mourned their rusted corpse, they lined up in queues several hundred meters long at bus stops, knowing that from now on, a 20-kilometer journey would take about 3 hours, and they would never get to transport their washing machines to the repair point. People rode bikes, of course, but first, not everything could be transported that way, and second, in Poland, traveling by bike from October to April wasn't fun at all. From the side of imperialist, patriarchal Europe, the border was just a parking lot with a booth adorned with 1 Polish and 1 EU flag. A policeman sat in the booth, just in case someone needed him. On the side of the progressive treasure trove of the distributive economy, the border was guarded by 3 rows of wire mesh barriers, concrete blockades, and a strip of plowed land bristling with concrete blocks, supposedly also laced with anti-personnel mines. Utopia needed protection not only from harmful and decadent ideology but also from the mafia, drugs, violence in schools and families, unhealthy lifestyles, and the terrorism endemic to the rotten part of Europe. They waited for over 2 hours. The bus in front of them was from the territory and was bringing kibbutzniks back from a trip to another SpecTerr, perhaps somewhere in another part of the continent. All the passengers were taken out for personal searches, and the old, battered bus was literally being dismantled piece by an army of people in gray uniforms. Dogs barked, and the entire concrete lot was flooded with the harsh, mercury glow of floodlights. Above, striped rainbow-colored flags fluttered. They weren't allowed to get off the bus. Norman watched with a queasy feeling in his stomach as a woman in a steel-gray jacket, with a rainbow armband on her sleeve and a beret cocked to one side, stood guarding the doors of their bus. An expensive German submachine gun hung from a strap on her shoulder. They lined up for customs in a long, narrow room, alongside rows of metal tables, under the harsh glare of spotlights. First, they checked the documents. "Person's surname?" asked the uniformed officer with hatred in her voice. Not a good sign. Women in SpecTerr's uniformed services were fierce, ideological, and generally incorruptible. He provided it. "Person's first name?" "Norman." "Person's gender identity?" He had long since learned to avoid any jokes. They were met with exceptional hostility. He suspected that the officers simply didn't understand jokes, and were always afraid they were being insulted. A man. There's no such category. It's either male person or a woman. Male person. Sexual orientation? Hetero. The officer shook her head, either in disapproval or in disbelief that someone could show such audacity. Purpose of visit? And so it went on and on. He was used to it. He wasn't a novice. He answered mechanically. His mistake came when answering the question about ethnic skin identity. He had forgotten about it, as it was a category he had never encountered outside SpecTerr, and nothing like it had existed even in his time. He answered, Polish, but that apparently wasn't the answer they wanted. European didn't work either, because it turned out that what the officer really wanted to know was the color of his skin, but she wasn't allowed to ask it directly. In Norman's world, there were no official circumstances, aside from describing a wanted or missing person, where anyone would ask that question, so he answered helplessly. White. The officer informed him in a bored tone that there's no such category. There was Caucasian, Afro-European, Orient European, Indo-European, Native American, Native African, or Maghreb European. He had no idea which to choose. He chose Caucasian, but it turned out his previous answer had already provoked the head guard, who was strolling nearby. White! White! She mimicked him, visibly enraged, grabbing ostentatiously at her holster. Fascist, chauvinist pigs coming here! No culture! Such rudeness! A white man, he says. Racist! The fascist pigs collected their ID cards and dragged their bags to the customs officers. A chubby, mustached man in a stained gray shirt couldn't figure out how to open the gecko clasp, so Norman had to help him out. Oranges! The customs officer beamed. One for you, buddy, one for me. One for you. Don't like it? Shall we claim your jacket? They weren't oranges, but persimmons, though the customs officer clearly wasn't a botanist. Norman discreetly slid one of the bags toward him, containing half a kilo of coffee, a pack of tobacco, a small bottle of Johnny Walker, a large but cheap discounted chocolate bar, a bunch of bananas, and 6 batteries. After completing the maneuver, he gently stepped back, showing he wanted nothing more to do with that bag. A slight twist of the lips signaled that the deity was not satisfied with the offering, sizing up the opponent's round physique, which suggested a fondness for hedonism. Norman employed the forbidden fruit tactic. Mechanically, he added a can of halva, sugar is white death, and another with canned bacon from an Arctic military ration. A faint smile appeared on the customs officer's chubby face. At that moment, Norman made his final move and lightly unfastened the gecko clasp on the pocket flap of his bag. The officer's eyes were greeted by the narrow edge of a colorful magazine, with the title Cock Devourer clearly visible on the spine. The opponent raised his eyebrows twice, conceding the match, and with a smooth, magician-like motion, he slipped the magazine under the counter, muttering, "Confiscated." The last official, armed with a stamp, was easily defeated by means of a €5 note, conveniently forgotten between the covers of the ID card. As they drove away from the border, the passengers looked like they had miraculously survived a plane crash. Conversation started, someone passed around whiskey, crime, and the driver turned on music. Norman looked at the territory bathed in the light of the morning sun. He was coming home. Outside the window stretched the same forests as on the other side, empty expanses, fields. The road was patched up and narrower. He saw billboards, but they were smaller, spaced farther apart, static, and generally unlit. The territory was free from the childish intrusiveness of advertisements. The signs displayed posters with social, political, and health-related messages. For example, a beautiful sepia photograph, at least from the early 20th century, showing a tiny, skinny Asian man in rolled-up pants wading knee-deep in water, carrying a mustachioed fat man in a white uniform on his back. The slogan, "White men have a lot to apologize for," or a bloated carcass with the caption, "Meat is death," or a young woman with a rifle against a rainbow background and the cryptic slogan, "Her story," and an old one that he remembered well, first others, then you. They passed an empty field with sparse trees, and Norman realized that it must be the ash forest he had helped plant as a child. For some strange and mysterious reason, the authorities had suddenly decided that pines were not ecological, and the forest that had grown there for as long as anyone could remember had been cut down entirely. Then, schoolchildren were sent to plant proper trees, ashes, beeches, and hornbeams. 5 survived. Since then, the wild, overgrown wasteland outside the city had been called the Ash Forest. When they arrived, the city, shrouded in gray dawn, looked completely deserted. To Norman, it seemed smaller, more crooked, and grimier than he remembered, yet painfully familiar at the same time. He knew every stone here. Nothing had changed. No vegetable stall had been repainted. What had cracked 10 years ago was still cracked, and what had warped remained warped. The streets were draped with rainbow flags. It was a holiday. In the empty old market square, now called Square of Che, the grotesque sculpture known as the guillotine still stood. He sat for a while on the edge of the old well, smoking a cigarette. The spectre way, hidden in his hand, drawn on discreetly, even though there wasn't a living soul around. The icy wind chased scraps of paper through the empty streets. He got up and, dragging his massive, overstuffed bag on wheels, made his way to the cathedral. He had to check if there was any Christian event scheduled for the day, as that would mean his mother would definitely want to go, and he didn't have the keys. He read the schedule pinned to the door of the church and learned that the next Christian-themed event at the Spiritual Culture Center wouldn't be until the following Wednesday, May 6th, and it would be a lecture on the role of women in early Christian communities, along with a mystery play performed by the multi-culti Spiritual Culture Ensemble. The traditional so-called Good Friday Mass. In the coming days, there would only be a reading of the Song of Ali's Death, Gaya Day. Circle dances for women, Vedic and trance drumming, and Shrabashwashwara, whatever that meant. Behind him, 3 trucks and 2 boxy, lead-colored vans with red Labrys symbols on their doors rolled into the square. He grabbed his bag and dragged it behind him, trying not to stare and to walk as calmly as possible. A group of people who had jumped down from the trucks began unloading bundles of banners and setting them up, leaning them against the poles of a stage erected under the guillotine. He heard conversations and shouts in Polish, French, and possibly Italian, followed by the clatter of van doors being slid open and the stomp of heavy boots. The overseers, both men and women, were setting up patrols around the square. He turned down the first side street he saw, feeling the cigarette's ember burning his palm, and only once he was around the corner did he toss it into a drain. He heard shouting and singing. Groups of young people were heading toward the square. The boys had long hair, and the girls had either short haircuts or shaved heads. Armbands, scarves, and bandanas in rainbow colors. Peace signs, Labrys symbols. In one group of about a dozen, a dancing girl stood out, dressed in a white tunic, with a calla lily behind her ear and a funeral wreath around her neck. He ducked into an alley to let them pass. He had no idea what it was all about, and he didn't want to find out. They stopped in the narrow street between the surviving old townhouses and began chanting something. Right in front of the spot he had chosen. He stepped into the deep doorway of a gate and leaned against the locked door. He didn't understand the words. They were yelling over each other. Norman waited patiently. A novice might have tried to walk through such a group, thinking, "What could these shitheads do to me? I'm not bothering anyone." No, my friend. Whether you're bothering someone or not depends entirely on the subjective judgment of the person feeling bothered. And there were 15 of them. Even if you could handle 15 opponents, the fight would attract the police. And then you'd be disappointed to find out that the officers didn't show up to help you. Suddenly, someone started singing. The others immediately picked it up, chanting in a hoarse chorus. They'd clearly been yelling like this for hours. "Doctor! Doctor! Get this frog out of my bum! Doctor! Doctor! So that I could dance! Boom, boom, boom! Boom, boom, boom!" Thank you, Norman thought calmly. This is what Svejk would have called idiocy squared. They'd finally lost it completely. He heard a metallic crash. They were jumping on the body of some poor old car. Safety glass shattered with a crunch onto the cobblestones, and an old-fashioned alarm wailed. Finally, they moved on, stubbornly screaming their idiotic song. From the direction of the square came the same chant, and both groups erupted into frenzied enthusiasm. Norman picked up his bag and went on his way. Another group crossed his path 2 streets farther down. He waited calmly for them to pass. Thankfully, they weren't singing about the doctor, which he welcomed with relief, as he felt that the stupid tune had left bruises on his brain. They were shouting rhymed slogans. Where had so many fanatics come from? The city had never had that many young people, and certainly not crowds of activists. The strength of the zone was in the older generations. They wanted someone to give them a job, take care of everything for them, and make decisions, and in return, they wanted company apartments, peace, a doctor, and a pension that would cover a bottle of potato vodka, bread, and lard. They didn't care about the rest. So where had this sudden enthusiastic clamor come from? Rostock, Lion! Already won! And what's that supposed to mean? Norman's housing estate consisted of 3-story blockhouses that looked like blocks of gray soap, painted in dull and purple colors with shapes meant to resemble the facades of Renaissance townhouses. It was ugly, but in some way touching and cozy. He passed a clump of lilac bushes hiding the clothesline, which he'd fallen from as a 5-year-old, garages where he'd bounced a tattered ball, and the psychiatric hospital built from Prussian red brick, surrounded by a park, where he'd snuck in and learned the secrets of female anatomy in the bushes behind the playing field. He was home. In his own neighborhood, nothing could threaten him here. They walked down the entire width of Neruda Street, the youth brigade of the European Equality Front. The group was no more than 8 girls of various ages, dressed in surplus military pants and heavy army boots, with rainbow armbands on their sleeves. Norman gave up dragging his bag on wheels and slung the strap of the heavy, miserable bag over his shoulder. A guy with short hair, wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses, sand-colored pants, and a leather jacket. They saw him. "Hey you, macho with the raspberry diarrhea! Looking for easy girls here?" He quickened his pace. "What's going on? Is the moon full today? Have they started adding LSD to the water? Du Manner Schwein! Come here! Come on, come on! Maybe you'll try me, pig? Show us what kind of man you are!" When you have to defend yourself against multiple attackers at once, it's best to find a corner or alley. Tight spaces make attackers get in each other's way. Remember, no one is going to help you, so don't waste your energy calling for help. Keep your back covered. Don't let them knock you down. If they do, protect your internal organs. You can write off your kidneys, shins, and ribs, but protect your stomach and head. As long as you're on your feet, go for the weakest first and take them out immediately. Attack the eyes, throat, and bridge of the nose. If your attackers are women, strike at the chest. Alternate between fighting and fleeing. These are lessons from childhood in the special economic territory. Turfu. But not with a 20-kilogram bag, after a sleepless night, in an open space. He caught a quick movement out of the corner of his eye and stopped mid-step. A chunk of concrete shattered on the ground less than a meter in front of him. "Come here, Lord and Master! Afraid of a few girls? Come, imperialist and Schwein! Mist V!" 2 or 3 of them started jogging toward him. He noticed one was holding an electric taser, and another had a telescopic baton, which she extended with a metallic snap. He took off his glasses and tucked them into the small pocket of his bag. Out of nowhere, a long, vibrating whistle rang out. One of the girls stopped. A window on the ground floor of the nearest building opened, and 2 red-headed men, around 30 years old, leisurely climbed out, helping each other not to trample the hollyhocks in the garden. They were identical, except one was wearing boxer shorts with piglets on them, and the other had on blue jeans. Both put on black t-shirts and unlaced army boots. The Madage brothers. A garage door opened, and a gladiator-built blonde guy with a buzz cut marched out, playing around with a motorcycle drive chain. Ammonia. A large bottle, probably thrown from the attic where Chief lived, exploded with a crash in front of the girls. They stopped, But they didn't need to worry about more projectiles. Chief was surely already running down the stairs. Chief. If the Sevre factory were to create a prototype for the chauvinistic male pig, they would have asked Ammonia to pose. 50 years ago, people would have considered him strikingly handsome. He looked like a 2-meter column of sinewy muscles. Even his jaw was muscular. He didn't take steroids. He had simply been working out in his garage since childhood using strange instruments he had made from scaffolding pipes and concrete. If he wasn't tinkering with his Junak motorcycle, he was working out. Or playing chess. Anyone who knew him could see that Ammonia's angular face and blonde buzz-cut framed good, gray eyes, trusting like a child's. But right now, they looked like the slits of a bunker. "Get lost, bitches," Ammonia said dryly, without excessive aggression. "Come on, Erica," one of the girls said. "Weg. He rouse. I'll kill that fascist pig. We're leaving. No need to get our hands dirty." The blonde with the taser spat in Norman's direction but didn't cross the line on the asphalt marked by the shattered glass. They backed off. "Good morning, Norman," the Maddage brothers said in unison. Norman hurriedly opened the pocket of his bag and quickly shielded his eyes with his Ray-Bans. "Viking," Ammonia said in surprise. "I didn't know it was you. You're back, you idiot?" "No. I came to visit my mom." "Ammonia, can you call the guys for tonight? Did I miss something?" Chief asked, emerging from the gate. "Listen, I'm having hallucinations. It looks like I see Viking over there, against the sun. Chief, how about a drink at your place tonight? We're gonna drink like soldiers, noble gentlemen. I'm pulling out the last of the lard from the cellar. We'll be toasting the Constitution, gentlemen of the nobility. Long live the 3rd of May. Chief bellowed the last part, probably for the benefit of the retreating brigade. The staircase clearly smelled of roast meat and cake. There was something touching about it. His mother had ignored her aching back and managed to stand in line somewhere for meat. She had saved up ration coupons and gotten eggs. She had secured some sugar. She wanted to prepare something special for his arrival. Living in Right Brain, Europe for 10 years now, Norman had eaten dishes that he couldn't even describe to anyone here. He knew 8 types of shrimp and liked morels and truffles. Yet he remained convinced that his mother was an unbeatable master of the kitchen. It's no great feat to prepare a dish that guests will swoon over when you have access to everything Earth has to offer. His mother only had ground beef scraps, eggs, onions, and potatoes. And not much else. Yet she could create hundreds of dishes. Hot and cold, fancy and everyday, traditional and experimental. The welcome was accompanied by running around, shouting, and calling out. "Son! Uncle Norman! You've grown so much! Come on here, sis!" Kuba had grown too much to sit on his uncle's lap. Besides, that wasn't the custom here. People get used to such affections, and then someone outside sees it and reports it. The end. Sexual harassment. Norman had spent barely 10 minutes over tea and apple pie when he noticed that the boy kept glancing toward the overstuffed bag. Because who comes for 3 days with a bag that big? Norman took pity on him and dragged the bundle to the living room, feeling like Santa Claus. "I've got some things for you," he said to Kuba. "But we'll take out the food first. Things for you are at the bottom." The food was hardly uninteresting. The simplest things caused excitement. "Mom! Uncle brought cheese. And sausage and ham. Can I have a piece? Oh God, salt and sugar. How did you know, son?" "I didn't. I just bought it on a whim because they were putting it out in the store near the zone." "What, there's no salt now?" "Oh, apparently it's bad for your heart. Now they're fighting heart diseases. It is allotted on ration stamps, but it's hardly anything, and the queues stretch all the way to the street. We're supposed to eat steamed vegetables. Just wait until Gerard gets here. You'll hear all about it from him. I steam zucchini and carrots for him, yet still he complains. So my dear brother's coming for dinner? Just don't argue, please. Tell that to him. I haven't seen Krakow sausage in ages. Oh, spices. You bought curry. And paprika. And Vegeta. Mom, look, mustard. And this, what is it? A kind of chocolate cream. Shampoo. It smells amazing. Pens. And batteries. Norman pulled out the gifts for Kuba one by one with a trembling heart. Kids are so complicated. He did his best, but what if he missed the mark? And for the boy, this was the only chance to fulfill some small dreams. He had probably been imagining for a month the magical treasures Uncle would bring. They sat in the tiny room, decorated with reproductions of maritime paintings and drawings of sailing ships. Among the ship models that Kuba had painstakingly glued together with Benedictine patience from pieces of cardboard. The professional model in a box adorned with a hologram nearly gave the boy a heart attack. Here you've got some paints and glue, and here's a set of pirates and royal sailors. You can make it into a navy ship or a pirate ship. There's also a memory cube in the box. Once you load it into your tablet, you'll have an encyclopedia of knowledge about sailing ships. Drawings, cross-sections, even sea shanties. Everything. And Uncle, you know that I'm a member of the Rainbow Warriors now? They signed up the whole class. And our leader says that if someone's really good, they might get into Greenpeace and go sailing. And I already have my uniform. And what do you do there? We practice riots and storming nuclear power plants. They built us these fences, and everyone practices making a ruckus. One of us in a special shirt has to run inside, and the others, dressed as imperialists, try to catch him. If he makes it, we win. The power plant is down. And why do you do that? Well, to fight the imperialists. Because those power plants are eating up oxygen and poisoning everything. And out at sea, they're spilling oil and killing Biscayan whales. Why would they do that? How come why? Because they're greedy, Uncle. They do everything for oil. Mom went to lie down, and Kuba ran outside with his new ball. Brother and sister sat in the kitchen with a bottle of rowanberry liqueur and some wild boar sausages. You signed the kid up for some kind of militia? And you think they ask? Do you know what would happen if I refused? I don't like it. They're stuffing him with propaganda nonstop. Training him. Eliminating the effects of gender typification. Combating individualist tendencies. They're hammering into him a sense of inferiority because he's a boy. Inferior, dumber, emotionally weaker, selfish, emotionally illiterate, over and over. And what can I do? The state knows best. Norman, don't torment me any longer. Did you find out anything about Greg? 0. So again, nothing. 0 isn't nothing, Martina. My detective says he's not on our side. I gave him Greg's DNA markers, complete characteristics. There's no trace of him. It's like he never left here. But I know he left. Martina turned on the noisy exhaust fan over the stove and spoke in a whisper. He paid a guy who smuggles people to the south. Then he was supposed to register and get in touch with you right away. And as soon as he had a job and a place, he was going to bring me and Kuba over. Something must have happened. Maybe he doesn't want you to know where he is. Greg? Man, do you know how much we loved each other? How much he loved me. If it weren't for me, he would have jumped out a window 1,000 times. Sometimes we would spend hours talking about what we'd do when we got out of the territory. You don't understand how close people are when the whole world is against them. I know something happened. But what? I don't know, maybe they caught him? Norman, things are getting worse here. Everyone's informing, spying. People disappear, they're relocated to other tours. I'll get you out. I'll pay off your student loans. She shook her head. Tried to take Mom. But she won't agree. Why? She helps me with Kuba. She has her pension here, her apartment, healthcare. Even if it's lousy, it's free. She's afraid to move. She's lived here her whole life. She won't want to be dependent on you. And I have to wait. For what? For him to be released. Either he'll escape or something, I don't know. Someone might find out something. And how will we find each other if I'm there and he's here? I don't want to be without Greg. Either we both leave, or we both stay in the tour. And there's nothing Gerard can help with? Oh, stop! He'd be the first to report him. He hated him. For what? Because Greg was a real man. Not some homo undefined they want. How can you? She tried to imitate her brother's voice. He's a patriarchal pig. You cook him dinners. Disgusting pig. You've stunk up the whole building, Gerard shouted from the door. It's May the 1st, and here it smells like burnt carcass. Because my capitalist brother has arrived and must have his dead meat. Shame in front of all our neighbors. He turned to Norman. Well, hello, he greeted, seeing Norman's outstretched hand. No way, he declared. Here, we greet each other properly. You're SpecTerr. And then he greeted him. Properly, like an old ant, pressing his cheek to his and blowing fake kisses into the air. He had clearly gained weight, and his long hair had given way to a smooth forehead that had pushed the remaining curls to the back of his head. The first thing he did was critique the toys. Why do you have such an old ship? That's from patriarchal times. Can't you build models of buses or animals like your friends? What will this teach you? Do you really need to? He turned to Norman. Push this gender typification stuff? What is this? It's the crew. Maybe you can explain to me how these little figures promote gender equality? And look, there are cannons and swords. Are you teaching violence to the child? Actually, most of the pirates are women, Norman shot back. See? They have earrings and scarves on their heads. It's an all-woman crew hunting men's ships at sea. It's not violence, it's a fight for equality. Quite unbelievably, Gerard bought it. Norman looked at him in horror. They sat down at the table, but the pleasant atmosphere didn't last long. So, what's new with you? Gerard asked. Promotions? Money? New little cars? Built more fast foods and supermarkets? Tell us, how much do you make? Thanks, I can't complain, Norman replied. And what about you? Sewn more t-shirts for my fast food employees? Maybe your slaves made more brooms for supermarkets? Boys, their mother scolded. He started it, mumbled Norman, feeling like he was 7 years old. Mom, did you salt this? Just a little, Jerry. It's inedible otherwise. And you probably cut it with the same knife that touched the carcass? Mom, why won't you finally learn how to cook? I sent you to a vegan and vegetarian cooking course. Soon you'll be serving dinosaur, mammoth, and the child eats this. Please. Dead meat sprinkled with white death. And everything perfumed with these stinky powders. We will never raise a progressive society like this. Don't you know the latest research? One day I'm going to take all this and throw it out. Don't yell at your mother. Oh, look, the head of the family speaks up. Big white father. And why do you keep bringing them this stuff every time? The whole fridge is full of that junk in colorful packages. Plastics and preservatives. Because what? They're starving? The stores here have everything you need for healthy eating. There are courses, there are guides. The committee is bending over backward to make sure everyone eats right. Ration stamps guarantee a balanced, healthy diet. But no, good old uncle from pro-American, imperialist Europe has to come and poison everyone. That's why they'll never change their eating habits. If you don't want it, don't eat it. Eat your pine cone. Who's stopping you? And it went on like that. Over coffee and apple pie, Gerard finally calmed down and started encouraging everyone to go to the square and join the love parade. Gerard, their mother pleaded. Can't we just sit for a while as a family? Don't you understand that this isn't some holiday for patriarchal so-called families? It's a grand tradition. We're hosting youth from several territories. Where did they all come from? Norman asked. There's a radical youth conference in Białystok, and some of them are staying here and celebrating. I saw. Twice they almost attacked me on the way from the station. You probably provoked them. They need to blow off some steam. It's because you've been discriminating against the whole world for hundreds of years. Just look at yourself, shaved head, American sunglasses. You symbolize everything they hate: patriarchal Western civilization, all the lies of capitalism, individualism, imperialism, male, testosterone-fueled arrogance, inequality. They're just reaching for justice. You've locked us in reservations and think you can peacefully devour this planet? Not for much longer. Today, we celebrate the new votes in Lyon and Rostock. We have new SpecTerrs, and soon all of Europe will be ours. Your place is in a reservation, my dear brother. Just a few more riots, a few bomb attacks, and even your people will realize that enough is enough. You can't stop progress. The only reason you exist is as cheap labor. Norman hissed, pale with anger. You sew t-shirts, assemble lighters, burn memory chips, and make pens cheaper than the Chinese. You feed off our taxes, because someone has to work for you, my dear brother, while you build Plato's utopia. It's cheaper to keep parasites like you in zones than on welfare. But don't hold valuable people there by force. And who's holding anyone by force? Everyone can choose. Then why all the minefields and barbed wire? Why couldn't Greg just leave? That pig? He ran away and left Martina. Because he couldn't handle building a better world. He couldn't stand equality. Just like you, he couldn't understand that he's not the most important thing. We don't believe in individualistic self-awareness. That's a self-created myth of patriarchy. Someone like Greg doesn't matter. There were more important people than him. And he took advantage of everything we gave him for free: education, healthcare, and then he ran. So, he couldn't pay you enough on time? And why couldn't he stand it here? Why did he work as a foreman for 10 years? Didn't he deserve more? He was a great specialist. Finally, we're getting specific. I've said it before, here it's not enough to just be some sort of specialist. What matters is justice. The ones who deserve it get promoted. There were better candidates, or those deserving of affirmation: women, representatives of minorities. First others, then you. But of course, he couldn't understand that. Sure. I remember. His whole life, he was always last in line for everything. He was stupid. I work in human resources. I saw his intelligence test results. Greg's? But I knew him. Sharp, educated, he made connections quickly. I'm talking about real intelligence. Not that right brain, testosterone-fueled nonsense like so-called logic. All of that is just cultural constructs. Have you seen his social intelligence test results? Emotional intelligence? His team cooperation scores? Sense of discipline? Group awareness? He was an idiot. Like every testosterone slave. A selfish jerk, always me, me, me. Stop it! Their mother protested, and Martina turned pale, tears welling in her eyes. Can't we act like people? Gerard, you're not at a rally. One must fight for a progressive society in every place and at every time, Gerard declared. Everything has political significance. But fine. I can stay quiet. After a long moment spent poking at his apple pie, Norman tried to tell a funny story about something that had happened to him in Crete. His mother and Martina listened with relief, even beginning to smile. Gerard lasted about 3 minutes. Martina also had a wonderful vacation, Gerard announced. I arranged an exchange for her to a SpecTerr near Sochi. Instead of mindlessly lounging by the pool all day and drinking alcohol, she worked in factories assembling home appliances and was no more than a kilometer from the beach. And in the evenings, there were cultural events where she could learn the local folklore and participate in bus tours. And she even got to buy an excellent vacuum cleaner from surplus stock. It was all real fun. Right, Martina? Yes, she replied. Real fun. Norman fell silent and sipped his tea. For the sake of his mother and Martina, he resolved not to let himself be provoked. Gerard finally glanced at his watch. You're really not going to watch the parade? There'll be transvestites in beautiful costumes and musical performances, and... No. Suit yourselves. I'm going. He left, and Norman noticed that he had discreetly snatched the bag of small souvenirs that had been prepared for him from the hallway. Their mother rubbed her face with her hand. Pour me a glass of something. And a cigarette. He's getting worse, Norman said cautiously. Don't even ask. Around 7, he packed a section of his overstuffed bag, which could be carried on a separate strap. It contained personal items, a toiletry bag, a huge bottle of vodka with a pump, and some canned snacks. His mother looked alarmed. Norman, don't go out tonight. With their march happening, even the locals stay home. Better not to wander around. Mom, I'm not going to the square, just to Chief's. 2 blocks away. I'll probably sleep over at his place. Just be careful, please. And pass my regards to Ammonia. There are certain rules about parties. First of all, no shouting. What's more important, a few incidental shouts or just the chance to meet up? A few people talking at once is already enough noise. Technically, social gatherings are legal, but they're frowned upon. One complaint, and there's a raid. Then it turns out someone exceeded the permitted alcohol limit, or that tobacco traces are found. Sure, you're allowed both in your own apartment, but is an apartment granted by the territory really private? Or does it count as an assembly? These were the kinds of gatherings Norman missed the most. He had friends on the other side, but he couldn't find that same sense of community and friendship. Here, everyone was bound by a shared hardship. The same enemy. The same beliefs. A few people who trusted each other because, otherwise, they were always alone and in danger. No one asked? So, how's it going with you? Here, conversations were continuations of those interrupted at the last meeting. Even if that meeting had been 5 years ago. They sat around a big table, which Chief had assembled together from thick plywood sheets, resting them on folding trestles. Did I hear right? The Viking ghost has returned? Hey, Waldy! Did you bring some crude oil? That's the famous moonshine of Białystok. Out with that. Tonight, we're drinking vodka premium, like lords. Brought by Viking. We could go blind from your swill. Hands off. The moonshine's for Viking, to remind him of his roots. Thanks. I'm touched. After a few rounds, all the lighter topics were exhausted. They began reviewing their friends. The roll call of the fallen. Those who emigrated essentially didn't exist anymore. Norman was the only known exception who tried at all costs to visit the territory. The rest preferred to forget about it once and for all. Someone started humming. What happened to our class? Man, it's gotten so shitty here. Why do you even come back? Why didn't you all leave? Not everyone's as crazy as you. You turn 18 and have to decide overnight. With no craft, no money, no job. We got lured by the promise of free education. Now, sure, we can leave, if we pay back 5,000 euros for every year of studies. And I was dumb enough to be happy about no entrance exams. And we earn. Uncle, how much do we earn, really? Roughly 80 euros. How do you even calculate that? In goods? Based on the battery parity. The what? What else am I supposed to calculate by? Our food is cattle feed to them. Should I compare a bottle of potato vodka to the divine nectar Vikings about to treat me to? A battery is a battery. Ours leak and don't last as long, but a battery's a battery. I could also convert it to light bulbs, but they use different ones now. Cold ones? Worth 100 of ours. Fine, but can't you pay them back with 20,000 vouchers? They claim it's the same. They're not that stupid. They want euros. But not everyone went to the uni. Almost everyone. Ammonia was ready to go right after you. He's just as tough, but his mother got sick. Time limit passed, and goodbye plans. And then Madej Bro fell in love with a girl who couldn't imagine life outside the Tur, and he got married. That was the end. Sexual harassment in marriage. She left him naked. 2 daughters. And Bro Madej? You don't know the Madej brothers? If Madej Bro isn't going, then Bro Madej also stays. Nothing to discuss. We all thought we had time, that we'd make it. We thought we'd learn a trade first and go afterwards. We thought we were smart. You know how it is when you're 18. all the time in the universe for everything. But now, we're screwed. Viking, what about your brother-in-law? Gone. What do you mean? I hired a detective. He didn't show up. Well, damn. Means they got him. He's toast. So where is he now? Let's talk. Ammonia nodded toward the door, indicating they should step outside. They went out onto the flat roof, which Chief called a garden. The building where he lived had been dubbed a penthouse. Viking, it's getting worse here. It's entirely possible your brother-in-law was killed. It's happened before. You can't prove anything. Someone disappears and that's it. No body, no case. But don't tell your sister yet. Maybe he's still alive. They've got some re-education camps. I know for sure because Bronco ended up in one. He's out now, but he doesn't talk to anyone. I think he's lost it. He doesn't speak at all. Bronco? Yeah, Bronco. Damn shame about Greg. I knew him. Really good guy. That's why your sister doesn't know I had a thing for her. Ammonia. Surprised? For 6 years. The last normal girl in the tour. What a woman. That's why I refused to believe Greg could leave her. You know, for them, the fact that men don't hit on their friends' women is an insult. They think it's about them and that we objectify them. They have no idea what loyalty is. Cold out here. Let's go back and drink. So how's your brother? Don't get me started. I'm ashamed. Came to our mothers today with a snout like a propaganda megaphone. Did you know he got himself castrated? What the hell are you talking about? Lost your mind? Seriously, he did. Like a pig. It's very trendy. Extends life, frees you from evil testosterone, prevents all sorts of diseases, and it's contraceptive. Maybe you mean a vasectomy? No, Viking. I mean the removal of male sex hormones. Cutting out testicles. Then you take estrogen pills, but weak ones so you don't grow boobs. Can you imagine? But why? Because it's Snag. Sensitive new age guy. A soft man of the new era. One that doesn't want to be a slave to evil testosterone. Plus, now his promotion's guaranteed. He's practically half a woman. His sensitivity, brother, will skyrocket. Come on, Ammonia. Now I really need a drink. My God! Does my mother know? Viking, everyone knows. They went to sleep really late. Not only Norman stayed overnight, but also Uncle and Waldy, who fell asleep even before the party was over. Madage brothers and Ammonia left together, as, unfortunately, bromadage needed to be carried out. What are you taking there, Viking? Take some too. Hangover pills. How come? Such a cure was invented and I know nothing of it. Take the blue now and drink at least half liter of water or milk. In the morning you take the red and you're fine. As long as you sleep for at least 4 hours in between. And I won't have a headache? Headache? Breathalyzed will show 0. Here, keep a full box. He left discreetly in the morning, not waking his friends. If you do something in the territory, it's better that no one knows about it. When he was in high school, Mariana was the undeniable queen of the school. Being in love with Mariana was something banal, common, and obvious. And doomed to utter failure. The distance between the princess and mere mortals was so immense that it turned infatuation into childish foolishness, like loving a movie star. She looked like the most beautiful daughter of the Mediterranean Sea. If she had played Cleopatra, the tapes of all previous portrayals would have been ceremoniously burned. Norman had reached a pinnacle of sorts because he managed to get them to meet in secret one summer for a whole 2 weeks. Then she broke his heart, and in desperation, with nothing to lose, he left the territory. A while later, Mariana also emigrated, but to Paris. She was truly stunningly, strikingly beautiful. It was no surprise that she decided to become a model. She hit the scene just as fashion designers were favoring a new beauty ideal. They wanted pale, anorexic blondes with vacant stares and thin fingers. A tall, dark, Mediterranean beauty with almond eyes, wrapped in a cascade of black hair down to her waist and carrying herself with regal majesty, didn't spark the slightest interest. 1 year of frugality and lack of success was enough to defeat the princess, and she returned broken to SpecTerr. Here, she had a roof over her head, a job, and people still considered her beautiful. Now, after a few years, Norman could come here and have his Levantine princess anytime he wanted, for a pair of tights. Had she succeeded back then, she wouldn't even take his calls. He thought of her fondly. He felt sorry for Mariana. She adored men, luxury, and fancy clothes. She wanted to be loved and carried in someone's arms. The SpecTerr, full of ugly, arrogant, hostile women and men who were hunted down and cowered in corners, must have been hell for her. Instead of furs, jewels, and marble, she was surrounded by dingy walls and unwashed people in drab, coarse rags. Norman didn't even know if he loved her. He knew for sure that he wouldn't want to live with her back home. He knew her well enough by now. But he loved her beauty. The unearthly, burning beauty of the Queen of the Levant. The stairwell smelled of cabbage, though probably not steamed cabbage. They had already arranged everything. He had called her from his mother's house on the first day. Now, as usual, he used a phone booth because cell phones didn't work in the territory. He said only, "It's me." In the doorway of her building, the buzzer already sounded, unlocking the door. As quietly as possible, he climbed to the 3rd floor and discreetly slipped through the door, already left ajar. The princess kissed him tenderly, as if he were her long-lost lover. They stood there, Norman still holding his bag, with Mariana pressed against him, her whole body trembling and hugging him with desperate, passionate intensity. Unfortunately, it wasn't really about Norman. The Queen of the Levant truly longed and trembled with desire. But he had no illusions. At this moment, Mariana was embracing and kissing Europe. Paris, London, Porsche cars, the Eiffel Tower, and the Ritz and Savoy hotels. The Diamond Exchange in Amsterdam. Castles along the Seine. The Côte d'Azur. Life in his world never offered such moments of excitement. Here, it was enough to give someone a pen, a few bottles of perfume, a set of eyeshadows and mascara, 10 pairs of tights and stockings, some slips, or even a few bars of Yardley soap. That's how you could give someone, at least for a moment, genuine happiness. Let them briefly forget about SpecTerr. Happiness for €50. He loved it. What's this? Mariana held a rectangular bag made of thick plastic, filled with a bright green gel. Multimorph. What? A dress. I'll show you. Do you have a basin large enough for you to stand in? I do. Here's the control tablet. Look. You pour this jelly into the basin, a tub, or, worst case, onto the floor, put this attachment in, and by touching the screen, you first choose the design, then the colors and fabric texture, and press enter. Then you stand in it. The gel coats your body and takes on the chosen shape. Done. 3 minutes and you've got a dress. Oh my gosh! Wait. I need to get ready first. Mariana grabbed the cosmetics, stockings, the multimorph, and the tablet, and rushed to the bathroom. Norman settled into the armchair, taking a sip of cognac. When she emerged from the bathroom, her body was covered in a burgundy-colored dress, shimmering with diamond-like sequins, so tight that he could clearly see the moles on her skin, the halos of her breasts, and every hair of her precisely groomed intimate hairstyle. The dress looked like it had been painted onto her bare skin with red lacquer. Mariana posed in the doorway and then strutted to the window in high heels, expertly crossing her long legs and swaying her round, Levantine hips. She turned around. How do I look? You're a wonder of the world. Look. Norman lifted the tablet, tapped the screen with his finger, and pressed the transmit button. The material foamed into fur and changed color to blue. The girl approached the armchair, straddling Norman's lap and draping her legs over both armrests. How do you take it off? You just have to tear it. Then you put the pieces into the bag or basin, insert the attachment, and press reverse. It turns back into jelly. Then tear it off me. In the territory, you weren't allowed to have anything in the windows. No curtains, no blinds, no shutters. A custom that the Calvinists had introduced in Amsterdam had firmly taken root in SpecTerr, meant to protect women and children from the brutality of men. So that Big Brother could watch. That's why, when he visited Mariana, they usually went to bed in the evening and turned off the lights. During the day, they lay on a mattress on the floor, beneath the window ledge. Or they went to the bathroom. It was safer that way. Not today. I don't want to wait until evening. I don't want on the floor. I want you on that armchair. And I want to see you. See you all the time, Norman. He couldn't resist. Now on the table. I want you to take me on the table. The Queen of the Levant ordered. With utmost pleasure, Your Highness. Later, they lay on the derelict sofa. Princess hugged him and wept silently. I have enough of all this, enough. They are so cruel. I was so stupid to come back, so stupid, why? Perhaps I would have succeeded in time. He kissed wet cheeks and stroked the ideal, smooth skin that did not evoke the due interest in the catwalks of Paris. I wanted to leave again. I didn't study after all, but they keep refusing me. I've been submitting papers again and nothing. Missing this, missing that, motion denied. Eventually I found out I need to pay 20,000 euros to a certain guy in the committee. 20? Where to get that from? I earn like 100 at best here. I could maybe save 15. Want to know how much I've saved until now? 400. Don't be upset, but I even wanted to sleep with that guy, even though he's gross. And then... What happened? Turned out he's gay. I can't stand it anymore. I don't want to live here, Norman. I don't want it. Don't say that. He patted her head. I'll help you. I don't have this much with me, but I'll give you 2,000. And when I come back here, I'll bring more. And gradually you will save for the bride. You'll leave here. You're so lovely. But how can I ever repay you? You'll find something on the other side. You don't have to be a model necessarily after all. And then you'll repay me one day. He found his pants, located the gecko clasp along the belt, opened the hidden pocket, and scratched out the last thousands. He left himself only a few trinkets. Please! She kissed him like never before. As if the world would end. Suddenly she started to hurry. Out of nowhere. She forced him to dress up. As if struck by thunder. She rushed around him naked, in the cloud of windblown hair. She kissed him again and whispered, I'm sorry, and kicked him out through the door, jumping in one shoe. He sat on the stairs and put on the other one when he heard that downstairs the building door opened and numerous people entered the staircase. He didn't like that. He looked along the corridor, but there was no place to hide here. Whatever you do, even if it's just going down the stairs, better not to be seen by anyone. Eventually he shrugged and began walking down. He'll just pass some people on the shared staircase. What could go wrong? However, one floor below suddenly a door opened and Norman was caught by the collar from behind and snatched into the apartment with a violent pull. A muscular arm blocked his elbows. Someone's palm closed his mouth. Behind the door, a noise of heavy boots against the stairs was heard. Of many heavy boots. Now I will release you. He heard Ammonia's whisper in his ear. Stay still and quiet. No shouts or anything silly. Understand, Viking? It's me. And this is my aunt's place. He nodded his head slightly, as much as it was possibly in the bow-like deadlock. The grip loosened. Come, whispered Ammonia. Along the wall, don't approach the window. They entered a room filled with books. Ammonia stood behind his back and passed him old theater binoculars. Building just on the opposite side. 5th window from the left, top floor. Do you see? Behind the indicated window, 2 young women were dismantling a tripod and a small digital camera with a large lens. Now look down. See? 2 boxy vans, the color of scorched metal, with red Labries symbols on their doors, were parked under the entrance. Did you give Mariana money? Any gifts? You did, you sentimental fool, didn't you? Norman nodded. He remained silent. Well, that's prostitution, idiot. Her usual trick lately. On the stairs, there were sounds of stomping, shouting, and some banging. Then came the angry shriek of a woman, with Mariana's tearful cries in the background. You warned him! You warned him, you damned patriarchal whore! Norman jerked, but Ammoniac's hand came down on his shoulder like the claw of a crane. Stay put, you fool! They won't hurt her. She's a victim of the patriarchy. At most, she'll get slapped a few times. But you paid for prostitution. If they catch you, they'll never let you leave. From the stairs came the clatter of boots, the rattle of walkie-talkies, and shouted commands. He can't have disappeared. Check the street. Search all the apartments. From the top down. Move it, bitches. Find me that pig. Auntie, which way can he get out? Through the kitchen. Onto the ledge, from there to the kiosk roof, and quickly between the garages. There's a half-meter gap there. You need to run to the other side of the fence, and it leads out to the second courtyard. From ours, you can't see it. Just hurry, Mr. Viking. I'll open the window for you. Did you hear that? To the other courtyard and go through the plots to the woods. Someone wanted to meet you. By the bunker, remember? Go, don't run. And don't go back to your mother. I'll explain everything to her later, understood? Go to the bunker, whistling Shenandoah. Got it? Now get going. And your bag. Take the bag. Ammonia, Doesn't matter, Viking. Don't get all emotional. Godspeed, brother. Godspeed, friend. He remembered the next moments like a dream. The taste of plaster, the rough, burning scrapes on his skin, the hot tar paper on the garage roofs, then the tight, urine and tar-scented alley between two barracks. And the terrifying, wild drive of adrenaline. The light had become glaring bright, the colors overexposed, and the blurry images suddenly flashed into sharp mosaics of detail. Grains of sand underfoot. A flash of sunlight in the windows. The white sky. Under the cover of the overgrown allotment gardens, he couldn't stop himself from running. The small bunker stood a good few hundred meters into the forest, far from the paths, far from people walking their dogs or cyclists. They used to come here to listen to radio broadcasts from outside the zone, drink beer, or just talk, away from the terrifying adult world. And when they grew up themselves, they kept the secret, suspecting that this shallow, single-chamber bunker, protruding from the ground like a concrete mushroom on the slope overgrown with hazel bushes, might still come in handy. He was whistled back on the second attempt. From inside the bunker. Inside, on the sandy floor, sat a man in a black cotton hoodie, the hood pulled low over his forehead. He smoked a cigarette and said nothing. The glow of the cigarette revealed a sharp nose and eyes like empty, black eye sockets. Viking. Bronco. Two things, Bronco said in a dry, matter-of-fact voice. He used to be a journalist. A talented speaker. Now he spoke as if dictating a telegram. I saw your brother-in-law. He was still alive then. He's working in a secret research and re-education center. In the Tur 20. I don't know where that is. When they took us there, we had bags over our heads. Somewhere in the woods. I think it's an old military training ground. I didn't talk to him. I don't know if he's still alive now. The chances of him returning alive are slim, but not zero. I did return. People usually come back from those centers, but that one is special. That's not a good sign. Was your brother-in-law some kind of engineer? Industrial chemist. And a good one. A technologist, I think. That's bad. Second thing. Look. He handed Norman a piece of thick cotton fabric. Green. A rag, Norman said. Yeah, a rag. Now look. Bronco pulled out a pocket knife and placed the rag on a rock, then cut off a narrow strip, no more than a few millimeters wide. You have a phone? I do, but there's no signal here. Doesn't matter. Wait. Bronco took the strip of fabric and carefully placed it in a metal cigar tube from a punch cigar. Remember, Viking. It has to be in a metal container. Shielded. Understand? In a metal container. Norman repeated mindlessly. Now follow me. They descended to the bottom of the ravine and moved along the dry stream bed for a moment, between moss-covered boulders. Here. Bronco knelt down and buried the cut strip in a patch of sand. Come behind those rocks. Sit and keep your head low. 3 large rocks formed a cozy nook, sheltered on all sides. Phone. Norman took out his wrist-mounted phone from his jacket pocket and handed it to Bronco. He swapped the card in the phone for one from his own pocket. Now turn on the phone and dial this number. He handed Norman a piece of paper the size of a business card. Norman clasped the phone on his wrist and turned it on, waiting for the keypad to appear on the palm of his hand. He placed his thumb to his ear, but there was no signal. There's no such number, he concluded. Hang up, Bronco said. Now dial this other one and keep your mouth open. The sudden explosion was like the crack of a whip. Norman saw a flash of orange fire on the rocks, then ducked his head. Gravel, sand, and twigs rained down from above for a long moment. A flock of terrified magpies shot into the air, shrieking loudly. Instead of the patch of sand in the streambed, there was now a sizable crater with its edges scorched gray. Did you see how much of it there was? Bronco said as they walked back to the bunker. Just a scrap. Now imagine what a pair of pants could do. Or a jacket. Until you arm it, it's just regular material. Cloned cotton and harmless blends. It's called Fibrex A9. They didn't come up with it themselves, but they produce it. And they'll sell it to anyone who doesn't like the Westerners. No security check can detect it. Until you send the first signal, it's just regular clothing. You'll get the material in a box, a card, and both phone numbers. They make it in SpecTerr Pomerania 20, an old military training ground. You need to show this to someone. Can you remember? Bronco, I can't go back. What do you mean? Don't tell me you're staying? It's not that. The patrol is looking for me. I visited. You've been to Mariana? Yeah. Damn! Damn! Bronco yelled, kicking a tree. Stay in the bunker. I'll go check out. Wait until you hear. I know. Shenandoah. He sat in the sand, watching the trees through the entrance and the firing slit. He waited for a long time. So long that the ringing in one ear stopped completely, and the other quieted a bit. Eventually, he regained his hearing in both ears. Time passed. He found a pack of tobacco and rolling papers in his bag. On the floor lay a narrow silver box from Punch Cigars. He heard the whistle after what felt like an eternity. An eternity in a bunker. Bronco knelt by the exit. They've staked out the station. They're searching everyone who approaches the buses. They have your photo pinned to their wrists. The bitches, the enforcers, the harpies. It's no longer about harassment. They've made the connection to your brother-in-law. Norman felt his insides turn to lead. He tried to breathe through his nose, his fingers entwined. In a split second, his hands were slick with sweat. Then he heard someone cough outside. Who's there? Don't worry. I'll get you out of here, Viking. Getting you home is the most important thing in the world right now. Do you have any money? Hope flared and died like a flare on water. No. I gave everything to my mother and Mariana. At home. Can you quickly gather some cash once you're in Europe? I can. Depends how much. Well, probably about 3 grand. Norman inhaled sharply. 3,000 euros. For freedom. He would have paid 30 without hesitation. I have it. I just need to find an ATM, anywhere. Wait. Bronco walked off and started a hushed conversation. Only fragments reached Norman. Not like that. I'll go with the meat. They'll skin your freezer. The seals aren't a problem. The man pulled a small shiny metal cylinder from his pocket. Japanese made. He chuckled. We'll go with the Disney. He tossed the vial in his hand. That'll be 5 grand. Bronco returned to the bunker. Do you have 5,000? I do. Bronco sighed in relief. Good. But you have to trust me. Don't be afraid of him. I know the man. He just plays it tough, but he's a good guy. Did he help smuggle my brother-in-law? Are you nuts? Your idiot brother-in-law got mixed up with the skin hunters. Flack is a decent man. You'll get an injection. It's safe. I've checked the vial. It's sealed. Factory made. You'll fall into a lethargy, your body temperature will drop. Your vital signs will be undetectable. We'll lay you in a refrigerated truck, wrapped in foil. They won't notice anything. You won't suffocate because you'll barely breathe, and the foil is perforated. Once we're there, you and Flack will head to an ATM. Easy. Where will it be? Your choice. Poltusk, Sarek, Zegers, Radzamin, Minsk, Gora Kalwaria, Grojek, Radom. Zegers would be best. I can manage from there. He tried not to show any emotion. Zegers. He could be home within half an hour, on foot. Sounds were coming from far away, everything was swaying. He was frost itself, his muscles made of icicles, sorbate pushing through his veins, and his breath felt like the wind from the glaciers of Alaska. He was shivering. He vaguely felt jolts, and then realized that Flack was slapping him across the face. "Good evening!" Flack was shouting. Norman coughed and opened his eyes. He saw some smudges, blotches of rusty light. "Where am I?" "Zegers. Right on schedule." He realized he was sitting in the open doors of an old truck. He was shaking all over, just as if he'd fallen into an ice hole. "Zegers." Flack handed him a steaming cup from a thermos. "What's this?" "Lemon tea." Norman drank it, clasping the cup with both hands. With each sip, life started to return to him. He began to recognize the surroundings. "Let's move over there." He gestured. "Why?" Flack asked. "Because that's where the ATM is." When they got out of the truck, Norman realized he could almost walk again. His legs were still numb, but he was slowly thawing out. Flack pulled aside his jacket flap, revealing a silver pistol with a thick barrel, something like a flare gun. "What's that for?" "Relax. It's a pneumatic syringe. If you try to pull something on me, you'll get another dose, and I'll take you back to SpecTerr. On the house." His fingers didn't want to cooperate as he entered the PIN. The ATM might not have enough cash. He entered the PIN for special transactions, so the limit shouldn't matter. Incorrect PIN. 2 attempts remaining. ATM waiting for connection with your bank. He could hear Flack's heavy breathing behind him. Transaction in progress. When he finally handed the driver a stack of stiff, brand new bills, he felt his legs trembling. "Thank you for your custom," Flack said. "Sorry about the gun. These are the times we live in. Pleasure doing business with you. Sure you'll manage here?" "Yes." "Here's your bag. Want a sandwich?" "I've got some left. Smoked tofu with cucumber. Pretty good." "No, thanks. And if your head hurts tomorrow, don't worry. That's normal. Just take a painkiller and get some sleep. And it's best to take a hot bath right away." Norman sat for a while on the curb under the ATM. Afterwards, he climbed up the dam and stood there for a long time, gazing at the water of the reservoir, where the moon was reflected, as if he was seeing it for the first time in his life. As he rummaged through his jacket pockets looking for cigarettes, he came across a metal cylinder. An aluminum cigar tube from Punch, with a card stuck to it with tape, showing 2 phone numbers. The card was still in his device. "I'm not a hero," Norman said to the moon, leaning against the railing, looking at the shimmering waves. "I've had enough. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this." The tube felt very heavy and hot. And as he raised his hand, he suddenly remembered his nephew's excited voice. "One of us in a special shirt has to run inside, and the others, dressed as imperialists, try to catch him. If he makes it, we win. The power plant is down." "Oh God," Norman whispered. Then he tucked the tube back into his pocket and headed home. "Good evening, Norman," said his apartment. "How was the weekend?" "Like a weekend in the SpecTerr." Norman answered the empty 4 walls, feeling the tears running down his cheeks. "As usual.
I came back, and I feel like the happiest man on earth.